Hello and welcome to the Selah podcast. My name is Jacob and I'm here with Ben. And so during this week, our church is doing a week-long time of prayer and fasting that we call Selah. Selah simply is a word from Hebrew that essentially means to pause or to consider. And so what we're doing through this podcast is pausing and considering what it looks like to pursue God through prayer and fasting and how often there is breakthrough in your circumstances in regards to that. So first, as we get started, Ben, just tell those who are listening a little bit about how you're connected to the Refuge.
Thanks, Jacob. My wife and I, my kids have been attending the Refuge for about 6 years now. Found it kind of randomly through your wonderful women's ministry.
Hey.
My wife heard about something out in Kannapolis, which I didn't even know where Kannapolis was. Went to a women's event, came back saying, Ben, the presence of the Holy Spirit is so present here. Can we go check it out? We were in that season of trying to figure out if we were going to lock in at the church we were in or find a new place. And as soon as we got here, we knew. First week we were here, it was like, man, the Lord's presence is here. There was such community. We haven't gone anywhere since then.
Awesome. So obviously, those who are listening might be considering starting a fast this week with us as our church is doing that. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Ben's experience with fasting and how he's even found breakthrough specifically through fasting.
Awesome. Yeah, so I was somebody that grew up seeing fasting done. My father did it all growing up, especially on Sundays. He would fast, I think, breakfast and lunch. Watched my mom, woman of prayer, just fast constantly. Never had actually done it myself in any major way till I went through a very tough time in my life. So been married before, had gone through a divorce. It wrecked me in a lot of ways. And either walked through that can understand what that feels like. Lost everything financially, a lot of my friends, people closest to me. But what really happened was the Lord reset me during that time. But long story short, I used to live in Bentonville, Arkansas, which is headquarters for Walmart. Yeah. That was where my career has been for 17 years overall. I had left that behind during the season of my separation and eventual divorce. I'm seeking the Lord, and suddenly I get the opportunity to take a new job at Walmart back in Bentonville, Arkansas. And I said this to you earlier, Jacob, but it was Egypt to me. I was like, I'm never going back there. I almost made a vow, but I was like, I'm not going back to that place again. But I agreed to fast. And the reason I did it was I read a book by Jensen Franklin about fasting that kind of messed me up. And I said, let me take this up and try this in this way. So did it. I did a 21-day fast. I sought the Lord. During that fast, the Lord was very clear with me that he was calling me to go back to Bentonville, take a job that was honestly lower pay, less responsibility, lower title, give up the company car and the freedom I had where at the time I was working 20 hours a week. You're under the microscope of everybody there, all the things, right? The biggest thing to me was I just started dating an unbelievable woman that now is my wife. Her name is Liz. She had told me prior to this that she would never date somebody long distance.
Right.
So as the Lord brings me somebody amazing that I could see myself with, he's healing me. He asked me whether I trust him or not. So I made the decision to talk to Liz about it. I expected her to say, well, then we're done. But she shocked me by saying, well, if the Lord is calling you to do that, let's do it. Let's give it a shot. So I moved back to Bentonville. Jacob, I hated it. I hated it. It was worse than I expected. It was the worst job. I'd had 4 or 5 different jobs at Walmart. I loved every one of them. Always figured my way out into enjoying it. That first year was horrendous. Yeah. And I'm away from my family and friends. But I kept questioning God, asking if this was really him. And the wild thing is over time, he proved himself. And then eventually it turned into just amazing favor. Amazing opportunities came from that job. I was a buyer for Walmart. I bought all the product for Sam's Club, basically. But long story short, I look back now and me taking that fast, first of all, hearing the Lord speak, being obedient to that has opened up so much opportunity for me. And honestly, the reason we could move to Charlotte, become a part of this church, the community we're part of now, all is tied to that.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to do it. But the Lord broke me during that fast, and then I was willing to be obedient. And then now a lot of the freedom we have has come from that. So it's been unbelievable. So that was my first real experience in fasting, taking a fast myself, seeing the Lord move and respond. And then there's been multiple fasts after that.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you kind of described that fasting moment as kind of like a last resort, and that's not uncommon with most believers. I think we often look at fasting as like, if it comes to it, yeah. I'll suffer that much to fast. And there is an element to suffering of fasting in the sense of like you are giving up something, but I'm not sure why it's part of our Christian culture to act like it's kind of like that little last boost that we could give a try. But I've seen time and time again with friends and family who they did finally turn to fasting, and there was a breakthrough after that. And that doesn't mean fasting equals breakthrough. It's not an equation, like a math equation.
He's not a vending machine.
Yeah.
That's clear.
But he's definitely looking for us to give them everything.
I look at fasting in some ways almost like baptism. Jesus, there's certain things he asks us to do. Some things we don't understand completely why.
Yeah.
But out of obedience, he said, do these.
Yeah.
When you pray, when you fast. These only come out through prayer and fasting, right? So to me, it's like, man, either we read those scriptures, and I skipped them for a long time. It's not for me. But then when we experience that, man, it becomes, you get a hunger for the Lord in a deeper way. So I think it's amazing now. I don't do it all the time. I mean, weekly I fast a small amount, but like there are times I know I'm called just step away from everything, clear my head, and honestly, for me, break the habit of what food has done. You know, I'm being pulled by eating, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Break away from it, just like it's called for in the Bible.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about how, obviously that moment definitely marked you, you know, like you can look back at that and that becomes like a big building block to where you are now. So how does that kind of affect how you approach prayer and fasting and just your relationship with Jesus now, many years later?
Well, I mean, Jacob, it's cool because even since then, I'll tell you this, a couple of years after, one of my best friends, pastor, missionary, ended up marrying me and my wife, like godly man. He'd never really fasted either in a big way. There's a lot of Christians that just don't, it's not a part of their life, like you said. After I read that book, saw the Lord do what he did, it was about 2.5 years later, I encouraged him as my best friend, let's do a fast together. So we decided to do a 21-day Daniel fast. Not the easiest thing to do, especially if you love meat like I do. But we did it. We jumped into a 21-day fast. We were seeking the Lord on a lot of things, but we just want to hear his voice. We went 21 days, and I'm going to be honest, I can't remember everything the Lord showed us during that 21 days, but it was so good. We both agreed without hesitation, let's continue this. And to me, it went away from we're doing 21 days, because that's the number of days this fast is, which may have broken off some of the spirit of religion around it, to just go, Lord, I love you that much. I'm willing to forgo this for even more. I want to keep hearing you in this way. We probably went another 7-8 days. Around the 28th day, TJ called me the one morning, Ben, I heard God's voice. All right, cool, man. No, like audibly. Yeah. Long story short, he heard the Lord literally sitting in his room, in his room that he would pray in, and he heard the Lord say the word water. It's a very long story, but he basically gave us the idea to create a bottled water company, give away 100% of the profits to create clean water projects. More importantly, to give the living water. It's a wild story that's gone on now for about 15 years almost. Humankind Water was birthed, the nonprofit was birthed. We've touched over 300,000 people with clean water, but more importantly, the living water. And that came directly from a fast. Yeah. So it was really cool to see as I learned and tasted and I saw what the Lord is willing to do if I was willing to meet him there, and that I got to bring my best friend into it. And now it's a part of his life and it's expanded. We've shared the story on different platforms, but it's really cool to see once people get it. We don't have to do it. You get to do it. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So obviously your story is inspiring within itself, but obviously if Christians acted only upon inspiration, we would all be fasting all the time because there are a plethora of these stories out there, but then we were still like, but that sounds good. Yeah. I'm not going to do it. But for someone listening today who's just feeling like, oh, I'm on the fence, like maybe I'll give up that sugar or something, which is great. I'm not knocking that at all, but they're just kind of like, I don't know. What would you say as an encouragement to them to take that step?
It's tough, right? So again, I would hope if we're Christians, we pattern our life after Jesus, right? Yeah. That's who we're to emulate. He did it. During the 33 years he lived on the earth, he did it. I would challenge any of us that are a believer, if you've never done it, start with something, start small. Just do it. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but there's harder things you've done. Yeah. All of us have done harder things, gotten over certain things. But I would encourage, especially if you can do it, where if it's food, do something with food. Because I think those hunger pangs or missing that soda or that caffeine, whatever it might do, reminds you of, hopefully, hey, I'm hungry, I'm feeling that headache from the caffeine loss. Let me seek the Lord in prayer right now. Let me make sure I'm talking to him. If you're fasting and just giving up food, you're probably just doing something for your body. If you're not taking that time and applying it to spend time worshiping and talking to the Lord, you're probably missing it, right? Yeah. And there's people that do intermittent fasting and all those things. They're great things for your body, but to turn into a spiritual exercise where you experience the Lord, I highly encourage it. Start small. I would tell you, if you can get somebody to do it with you, it's awesome. True, yeah. You have accountability, or somebody's like cheering you on, man, you see that donut, which happens to me after I leave the gym every time, right? I call my buddy up and he's like, man, you can do it. Come on, man, let's go further. So just having accountability helps you. But I almost promise you, if you'll give it more than a day or two, you'll see him show up. Yeah. Yeah, every year we actually get questions about Selah because it's a corporate fast. Yep. And so some people feel like that could contradict the idea of when you fast, like don't go tell everyone, right? And the best way that I can explain it is kind of what you're sharing. It's not about
bragging about it. It's about accountability and like walking alongside someone. So when we're fasting as a church, you have all these believers who are doing a spiritual discipline like together in unison, which I think is something very special. It's the same way that we worship together, we sit under the word together, and then we can take a step of fasting.
I feel, even as I came driving here today to have the conversation with you, I'm thinking, I've had those thoughts, right? I don't want to share it with people, but there are times, especially in the Old Testament, where the people were called to a fast, a holy fast, right? To me, most of the time, it was preparing for battle or something coming that, whether they knew or not, the Lord was preparing them. So I think that's more of, that should be the spirit of how we look at it. And again, don't let it be a religious thing. You get to do this.
Yeah.
You're called into it by Jesus himself. So I love it.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for that encouraging word. I'm really hoping that it sparks something in someone who's been on the fence, who isn't ready to dive in, because it takes a little bit of faith to say that this is worth doing, you know? Yeah. I think the enemy's quick to say, well, what's the point of that?
Of course, he's good at that, right? He wants to keep us from something so good that God's given us right in for us. Any of you, if you happen to run into me at church, feel free to stop me or any of the people you see up on the screen too, because we'd love to share our experience. We're not perfect either. There's times I've fasted, I've fallen, but God's not sitting there judging me the whole entire time about falling. It's like, hey, he draws me to him again to continue in that. So just feel free to stop any of us.
Awesome. Yeah, so if you're joining us for the first time here on the podcast, I just want to encourage you, even if you're not a part of the Refuge or you just stumbled upon this online, join us with this. We're going to be doing this for 7 days, a time of prayer and fasting, and even find a way to include your family or your loved ones in it, because there's something about fasting in a corporate setting that really helps you to push forward and seek after what the Lord has for you. So we hope that you tune in each day, and we hope that you enjoyed this episode.